Oh. Now you're talking our language. No, that was fun. That was perfect. Yeah, exactly. If you know you haven't had one too many.
Well, we went out for Jess's birthday. Linda's husband Jess's birthday.
60.
Liz,
Yes.
Leon gave me a call. He's stuck in traffic, so
Okay.
he'll be here, but probably not.
Okay. Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Okay. Who can whistle? Good afternoon, everybody. There we go. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It is 1:30. We are live streaming, so you know, and recording, and we do have a quorum, though I do know that we have a couple folks still en route. A little bit of traffic congestion out there, especially from American Canyon to here, which is nothing new for us. So I'd like to welcome everybody officially to the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Tax Authority this Wednesday, November 15th. And it's currently 1:31. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance and welcome Iris from Calistoga. Would you like to lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 3 on the NVTA-TA agenda is a consideration and approval of the board members' request for remote participation. Do we have any board members participating remotely?
None today.
Thank you. And then Laura, let's go ahead and have roll call, please.
Leon Garcia, Mark Joseph, Kevin Eisenberg, Iris Lopez Arteaga, Liz Alessio,
Present.
Scott Sedgley, Alfredo Pedroza, Paul Doring,
Here.
Anna Shuto, Margie Moeller,
Here.
Robin McKee Cant. And we have excused absences today from Director Williams, Director Gregory, and Director Knight. We do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Item number 5 is the adoption of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda for the NVTA-TA? Not seeing any. Do we have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion by Doring and a second by Mueller. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Thank you. That's unanimous. Public comment. Do we have any members of the public who wish to make a comment for this NVTA-TA meeting? Not seeing any in the chambers. Do we have any online? Very good. We'll move on then. Chairpersons and board members update. Are there any updates from board members? Not on this agenda. Very good. And is there an update on behalf of the executive director, Danielle Schmidt? You're here today. Is there an update on the NVTA-TA? Thank you. We're on to number 9. We're just moving through. This is the consent agenda. Do any members wish to pull any items from the consent agenda? Is there any public comment? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Is there a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Doring, second by Sedgley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Very good. We have one item today on the regular agenda, and this is information only. This is a sales tax replacement measure, page 19 through 25. And Danielle Schmidt, you'll be leading this, correct?
Yes,
Thank
good
you.
afternoon. Danielle Schmidt's here to present item 1 11.1, I believe it is, or 10.1, the sales tax replacement measure. And this is just an update. So staff has been diligently working with many of your jurisdictional staff. We have a policy level committee that has some representatives of the NVTA board on that committee, as well as an executive steering committee where we brief the city managers and county board of supervisor CEO about the measure, as well as a technical steering committee made up of your public works director. So next slide, please. And what prompted, going out for a sales tax replacement measure in November of 2024, and it's really looking at declining pavement condition scores. So NVTA staff has looked at, what was Measure T set out to do. Measure T set out to improve local streets and roads pavement condition scores, and those have been rapidly either declining or staying in a relatively status quo. And so we're looking at really how can we improve that, as well as doing a couple other things over the measure that would improve how we administer the measure. So next slide. The proposed changes would be a 30-year measure. This would not be a new tax. This would just be a reform. So in November 2024, we would ask the voters to approve a 30-year measure that would continue the half-cent sales tax from 2025 to 2055. We would allow for bonding. As we all know, $10 today is worth about $5 in 10 years from now. And so our modeling has shown that when we are able to bring a lot of money through tranches forward in the measure, about in the first 10 to 15 years, we can significantly increase our pavement condition index, increase NVTA's administration fee from 1% to 2.5%. This would accommodate for project oversight, which would have to increase with the bonding capacity, as well as replace the jurisdiction's distribution formula. Nobody can reinvent the formula that was, agreed upon back in 2012 to something that makes more sense and have it be dynamic and updated every 5 years. Include a set aside for capital highway improvements. This agency and this board have worked really hard for projects like Soskel Junction, which will be opened up later in 2024, and that's going to push a lot of that congestion further south to Airport and Highway 29, SR 12 Airport intersection, as well as further down south. And so looking at these large regional projects and how we can really make an indent in getting some of them done, we need some capital to do that. We also want to update the maintenance of effort to also be a little bit more flexible and dynamic. We're looking at indexing it to the previous year's sales tax revenue. Right now it's stagnant. It's placed in time between 2007 and 2010. And then the squirrely language around the equivalent fund, we're looking at trying to come up with something, an alternative that would still meet active transportation interests, but might be easier to administer. So Laura, can you go to the next slide, please? So the local streets and roads distribution formula that was agreed upon by the steering committees and is before the board today is option 2. So this is based in return to source for every jurisdiction except the County of Napa, which is a hybrid of return to source and lane miles. And then it's evened out. There's some smoothing out effect because we're taking an average of the 3 years. And the idea would be we would update it every 5 years based on recent sales tax data. And this was, agreed upon so far by nothing. Again, I'd like just to put a caveat that nothing has been approved by this board, which would be the ultimate body to approve a draft ordinance. But the committees that have met so far have liked this approach. They did approve also having a 3% floor, which was a request of some of the smaller jurisdictions, with a 1% subsidy, meaning if your sales tax at the time, I think there's a illustrative version actually right here. So currently to Column F is what the sales tax would be using this new methodology. If you look at Calistoga, they're at 2.8%. Well, there's a 3% floor, so we're subsidizing them 0.2%, bringing them up. And so that's the idea behind the 3% floor with the 1% subsidy. Next slide. So as mentioned before, the kind of main intent of going out in 2024 is being able to borrow money against this measure. Currently, it just comes in dribs and drabs. It comes in around $25 million a year, but as we receive the funds, it just gets pushed out to the jurisdictions. And if jurisdictions want to make some significant impacts to their pavement condition score, we've actually modeled this through our Street Saver program, which is something that all jurisdictions in the Bay Area have to use to manage their streets, pavements, and understand, kind of plan ahead for what they're going to invest in. And across many different scenarios, so we have 3 different scenarios here. We have an equal issuance, a ramp up and ramp down. You will see significant increase in pavement condition scores. These are just illustrative. They're when we actually do, if we actually do pass a new measure, a reformed measure, and go forward, at the time after we pass the measures, when we would take a look at bonding, what projects are ready to go, and issue different tranches based on a lot of different market scenarios. So we just were looking at specifically, okay, theoretically, what if we programmed Measure T funds, in a ramp up scenario, so starting low and then, having the last tranche be something really high, like $100 million. This is what it would look like. And as you can see in the very far right-hand column, the current Measure T funding, as well as Measure T scores, and then looking at every single scenario for funding levels and corresponding pavement condition index that we've looked at, we've seen an increase, a lot of times double-digit increase in pavement condition scores. And this is after taking $80 million off the top to complete projects on the highway, on the regional highway network. So next slide. Again, looking at the maintenance of effort. So under Measure T, the 3 years for the maintenance of effort that jurisdictions have to meet. Again, Measure T funds was meant to not supplant, current efforts, general fund monies used on pavement condition, but it's really looking at supplementing general fund monies used on pavement condition and road projects. It's set in stone at 2007 through 2010, which were recession years. It's not, we want to make it more equitable and dynamic. And so we looked at indexing it to 20% of annual measure funds received. So this, in times of prosperity, this would go up slightly. If we're having a decline in the market, these would go down. And so you can see the new MOE is in the very last column there, and it's very close to what the current MOE is, but we feel like it's, more equitably indexed to the amount of sales tax monies coming in to each of the jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So the one piece of the puzzle that we're still figuring out is this equivalent fund measure. And right now, Measure T requires each of the jurisdictions to meet collectively, I guess, as a group, the equivalent to 6.67% funds that are generated by the measure using other funding sources outside of Measure T funds. So a lot of times this is general fund money. This is money that comes through NVTA, like our TDA money, our transit money, our highway money. We've been using to meet this measure. And so we've gone through several different, as mentioned, since August, we've been meeting with the jurisdictions. We've gone through several iterations and rounds of, what makes more sense, what's more equitable. It was requested by our policy steering committee that we do retain some, bike, active transportation, mode share requirement within the language of the ordinance. And so right now we are looking at an option that would increase from 6.67 to 7%, just to have a whole number there. The bike mode percent in Napa County. And then we would want to also include not only class 1 facilities, but class 4 facilities. So it broadens kind of what the eligible uses are for that 7%. And then we would also like to include routine maintenance, meaning your garbage removal, your street sweeping, your weeding, as well as non-routine maintenance would be treatments that you're providing to the bicycle network, whether it be repaving a class 1 or doing some sort of other road treatment on like a class 4, which is a protected bike lane of vertical separation, as you see here on the screen. So this is still something we are working with the Public Works Directors and the Napa Valley Vine Trail Coalition. And so we will bring something back to the NVTA-TA board in hopefully December or January, whenever we bring the draft ordinance language back. That is something, you know, most people can agree on. Next slide. And then, as mentioned before, we are looking at taking $80 million off the top in regional highway projects. The potential expenditure plan for those projects are listed here. Really looking at the intersection of Jamison Canyon Airport Road, as mentioned before. Once Saskell Junction is free flowing on the highway, that's going to push a lot of the congestion that way, as well as looking at operational and multimodal improvements in American Canyon, which has been a priority for this agency in our, you know, our plans and our programs, as well as the Highway Operations and Emergency Evacuation Center, looking at changeable message signs during times of wildfires, earthquakes, that are basically providing information to travelers using the transportation system of, you know, adaptive message signing, you know, what routes they should be taking, where they should be avoiding certain areas. And I think if you go to the next slide. So again, next steps and timeline approval. We are looking to bring back draft ordinance language that includes a lot of what I've talked about today to this body. Hopefully by January. I'm not sure if we're having a December meeting, but in the next couple months, you'll be seeing us back here. And then we'll go out to the jurisdictions and meet, go to the jurisdictions, provide city councils with a presentation of the draft ordinance, and then approval at the board of directors would, at this NVTA board of directors would be back in April and May. And then we would go to the county board of supervisors to put it on the ballot in May, June timeframe. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Thank you, Danielle. That's, you know, it's a big move, if you will, a big step, a big opportunity for all of our jurisdictions in this potential measure. Do we have any questions? Yes, Member Sedgley.
Yeah, not so much a question, but I know the discussions that I've been involved so far are considering competing measures. That seems to be a big challenge, because I think the school district is looking at something, possibly even the college. I think the city of Napa is looking, and so it'll be a full ballot. So is there any analysis being done on, or polling being done on? You know, I know we did some polling here, and the city's done some polling, but that's the concern, is hopefully they would all pass, but they might all go down also too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do believe that Director Miller is going to be meeting with city staff. We didn't know at the time that we issued a poll that there could potentially be a City of Napa item on the ballot as well. So we didn't poll for that. I think we would be interested to know if the City of Napa polled having, you know, the NVTA transportation measure on the ballot. One thing for our messaging and our informational campaign is that we, you know, this is a sales tax reform. We are not increasing sales tax. So I think that's one thing that the transportation measure has going for it. I think also the timing is right for the transportation measures as far as when Saskell Junction's opened. Anecdotally, very popular project amongst the community, as well as our funding agents, Caltrans, the California Transportation Commission. So I think that will bode well for this measure as well.
Thank you for that question. It's a good question. Yes, Vice Chair Joseph.
Yes, probably more in the way of comments as well. I do think the fact that we're not talking about a tax increase, but there is certainly talk at the school district level, at the Napa Valley College level, and Napa City. So that is a good source of concern. If we try to load too much up in November of 24, we'll probably all lose. The other point on behalf of Director Miller, who's not here, she always points out that anytime we're able to bring local dollars to a highway project, one of the nice things is there's a law that caps Caltrans's overhead charges to like 10%. So just for the record, that alone is probably worth a whole lot of money savings. And then my last one maybe is more of a question. I know the pavement condition index for American Canyon was looked at last time and it's a little better now, but I'm still convinced that we will probably do better than the single digit improvements. But that's my opinion, not based on any scientific modeling or facts.
Yeah, and I did talk to your Public Works Director, Erica Almond-Smithies, and she was saying that there's a couple projects that you guys have underway now. And so once those are complete, maybe if we reran the model, that could be something. And we'll rerun the model again, after those projects are complete. Adrell Coleman, who's a planner here, is quite good at running Street Saver now since he's been doing it for the last 3 months. So.
Okay. We'll work with him too then. All right, thank you.
Thank you for those questions and comments. Yes, Member Doring.
Yeah, thank you. With respect to the ability to do capital improvements, I note that most of that is centered in South County, and I note that there was a little nuanced polling done on the emergency aspects of operations. And I don't recall how specific that polling was. Was it drilled down just to sort of operations on highways, or was it more open-ended into that? And the reason I ask that is in my brain, and as the mayor of St. Helena, I'm particularly concerned about evacuation from our city, and also the ability to use some of those funds for capital improvements that relate to evacuation from our city. Our bridges in particular are substandard, especially on Silverado Trail. And I don't know if we actually asked that question, but in my brain, I'm thinking, yes, people understand the importance of emergency evacuation. For us, it's flooding or wildfire evacuation with a highly senior population. So that's the question I have, and that's a policy concern that I have in terms of it's so focused on just those very limited items that are listed in the staff report.
Yeah, so the emergency evacuation route language in the poll was attached to specific projects. So it looked at, SR 29, airport, Highway 12, enhanced evacuation routes such as, this one, Silverado Trail, Coombsville, what we call the Silverado 5-way here, and through American Canyon. And so I'll resend you the poll. We're not opposed. I don't think Director Miller's opposed to, going out again and polling again. I think that's something we would have to discuss with our polling consultant, EMC, as well as Director Miller.
I guess as a follow-up to that question, so.
Go ahead and turn your mic on. And maybe somebody needs to turn their mic off. I'll turn.
A couple times. There it goes. All right. So I guess back on that same issue, at some point we'll have an expenditure plan and these items will be specifically set out, right? Would there be some give and take there in terms of what is going to be included in that expenditure plan, especially on the capital side?
So
in other words, could I ask for something other than what's listed here?
good question. I think we're gonna have to go back to ask, our consultants about how specific we have to be. I think we would like to be more general and less specific, but it might be down to like the dollar as far as we're gonna spend X amount on, this project. We would like it, as you mentioned, to be a little bit more broad, where we could just say, $80 million in highway improvements and kind of list different things. So I think that's to be determined.
All right. Thank you for that excellent presentation. And it'd be great to have that presentation sent by email so we can pass it on to our.
Yes,
our
and
colleagues.
we will come to each of your jurisdictions and do
All
the
right.
presentation.
Thank you, Danielle.
Member Eisenberg.
Thank you. First, any increase in forced bicycle funding, I think is good. But aside from that, and at the risk of being a little bit provincial, and I've mentioned it before, I just can't help but mention it again. I totally understand that the fund distribution is based on funds received through sales tax through each jurisdiction. But I had hoped that perhaps need could be part of the factor, and for some of the jurisdictions which have very low sales tax rate like Calistoga, that there could be a higher floor. I understand the floor was made just for that purpose to help lower sales tax jurisdictions, but 3% seems low, and I just feel obligated to mention this.
Thank you, Member Eisenberg. Any comments or no? Okay, very good. Member Garcia.
Thank you. Little traffic delay, stalled vehicle northbound on 12 and 29. So patience gets you where you need to get. Thank you for the presentation. I'm looking forward to the refinement of it. And certainly, as mentioned, St. Helena, evacuation is important to all of us. We're not impacted by the fires, but certainly the response for emergency vehicles coming through our city. So that would be very much high on our list. I think our residents as well. Something not directly in the Napa County, but it's the State Route 37. There's a big conversation on tolling as a way of covering costs. Though that doesn't impact any jurisdiction here directly, it's the residents of it who commute back and forth on it. There might be a sentiment in that about how voters might respond to a ballot issue that we're trying to move forward as well. So just be aware of that. The 1229 intersection has increased a lot in terms of eastbound traffic in the evening. Some of that is State Route 37. It hasn't been any significant change in it so far, but the impact of affordable housing, I think, is it. You go out, you head towards, say, Fairfield from this location. You notice there's two left turn, whatever we call them, queue lanes, stacking lanes. There's more traffic in that than there is on the through lane 29 going south toward American Canyon during commute hours. So I look forward to the roundabouts as a solution there. Actually, the North Kelly Road intersection, the traffic trying to turn left oftentimes backs up to the point where they're blocking 29 going north. So that's much needed. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Garcia. Member Shuto.
Thank you. I'm very interested in that active transportation, that 7% number, and how we get there, and concerned when I see that so far staff doesn't see a way forward, or not necessarily, it was city staff that was in the report. So I was interested to know more about that, because I want to make sure in terms of us meeting our climate goals and just having our cities all be better places to be getting around in other ways than in our cars. That to me is very important. And if we don't identify where the funding is going to come from, we won't actually be able to do the projects. I think that's been the big barrier now, looking at our cities from our city perspective, is that we all have the aspirations, but if there's no money, they don't happen. And I want to see the change. I want to actually see all of us and all of our cities and county be able to implement more of this. So can you give us any more understanding about how that's going to happen, what the conversation has been? Please have some hope, basically, for us.
So currently the jurisdictions have to meet the 6.67%. We meet it collectively. And I think I've told this body before, a lot of that has been met by NVTA. Backfilling the shortfall on the Vine Trail, specifically with highway funds and transit funds. And so currently the language states that a jurisdiction, they're receiving, $10 million a year or whatever that may be, and 6.67%, indexed to 6.67%, but not coming from those funds has to be used on Class 1 facilities and committed to Class 1 facilities. So right now, we are meeting this requirement relatively easily. I think we've exceeded it. I mean, easy in the sense that NVTA has spent a lot of money on the Vine Trail project. And as well as the local jurisdictions, the county of Napa, the city of St. Helena and the city of Calistoga have all spent a lot of their own general funds on that project. And I think the concern is just having that commitment, whether it be 6.67 or 7%. I don't think that's so much the issue, is that just having that commitment for 30 years, from 2025 all the way to 2055, there's some concern from the Public Works Department of being able to meet that commitment. And so we are committed to finding some sort of solution that hopefully works for, the majority of our jurisdictions. And so it might just be, we continue what is in the current ordinance, that could maybe be a default, but we are working with the technical steering committee, and we'll meet with them again in December before coming back to this body. So I think the policy steering committee and this board has all, voiced that having some sort of commitment to active transportation is really important within the measure, because we don't want to strip it out of the language of the measure.
One more follow-up question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there talk about opening it up beyond class 1 so that more of the projects can happen?
Yes. So class 4, which is an on-street but buffer or not buffered bike lane. Diana's gonna. It's a separated vertical separation bike way or lane is also an option, as well as maintenance. So using it on, your labor, your street maintenance, as well as using it on doing certain treatments to the pavement for either a class 4 or a class 1. We are trying to make all of those eligible, which would broaden the language that is currently in the Measure T ordinance to allow for more uses.
Yes, Vice Chair Joseph.
Yes, I just want to comment on a couple of the items. Number one, on the active transportation element, I support trying to earmark that 7%, because I do agree that we've got to invest in class 1s and class 4 bike lanes. And earmarking the dollars is the best way of making it happen. So I hope we can work out the language there. The other one relates to the emergency evacuation component of St. Helena. And as Director Garcia said, I think it is an important element. So I'd like to see some flexibility, especially on the capital end of it. Maybe not part of that $80 million capital budget, but maybe some discretion in the language that says, okay, local jurisdictions might be able to do something related to facilitating, an alternate parallel route, as a means of evacuation, or more capital projects specifically related to evacuation routes, so that there's some way in which we can say, look, it's not just going to be a facility at the new maintenance building, but each jurisdiction might be able to allocate some of their resources to making improvements specifically to enhance the ability to get around an emergency. So some language, if we are going to repoll, it would be nice if we could kind of think a little creatively about the emergency response and see what kind of discretion there might be at the jurisdictional level. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree with that, that need that we have and responsibility that we bear for all our communities throughout, the Napa County. As we know, it wasn't that long ago, we were in the middle of a fire bowl, and we're very fortunate that it didn't encroach and wipe out Calistoga, St. Helena, and move on down. It didn't take out Patrick Road and Browns Valley of the city of Napa. Many of which were due to Good Samaritans, many of which was due to calm minds, and really great leadership and the assistance of many in terms of fighting those fires from, coming into our towns and taking more lives. So I agree. I know that these priorities were based on polling and response from the community, but I do think in terms of, Danielle, what you said is if we can broaden the definition of the scope of the priority, it'll allow each jurisdiction and us to have more flexibility as times continue to change and shift. So we're not so bound, if you will. And we can, as already explained. I do want to say too, that I know that, regarding the 6.67%, I know that the city of Napa is committed to working with all the agencies, all the jurisdictions to find a solution. So in terms of giving you hope, there's a solution there. We want to be careful that we don't have some unintended consequence, as they say. And there's the potential of that happening when we try to do great things. So it's just being thoughtful in terms of how we find that solution together. And I believe that's very much available and it's the case. I'm going to move this on to Member Sedgley. Do you have your light on?
Just a real quick one. The 2012 Measure T, was that a 30-year measure? 25.
25.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, do we have any public comment on this, Laura? I don't see anybody in the chambers, but no? Great. And I notice our lights are off. It's nice for me, but I don't know if people can see us or if we want our lights on, just a FYI on that. Okay. Well, then. Oh, is that what it is? Okay, everybody's a seven inning stretch. Well, that's it for this regular item. Thank you everybody for your comments. Are there any future agenda items board members would like to request? No? Okay. Then let's go ahead and adjourn the NVTA-TA at 2:06 p.m. and move on to our regular NVTA agenda. So again, I hereby call the meeting of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority agenda on this Wednesday, November 15th, and it is still 2:06 p.m. And I don't believe that we've had any changes in terms of a request for remote participation, but I do know that we have Member Garcia here, and also want to welcome Member McKee Cant from Yountville here for this meeting, in addition to everybody else. Is that satisfactory, Laura, in terms of roll call?
It is. I will confirm that roll call was taken at the preceding NVTA-TA meeting, and in this current meeting, we have an absence of one voting member. We do have quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda? And if not, do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion by, was it Doring? And a second by Shuto. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, that's unanimous. Are there any public comments for the NVTA meeting? I'm not seeing anybody here in the chambers. Is there anybody online, Laura, who wishes to make a public comment on an item that's not agendized? Okay, very good. Moving to item 6, and this is the chairpersons, board members, MTC, and egg bag updates. Do we have an ABAG update, Member Garcia?
Yes, ABAG will be meeting tomorrow. Most jurisdiction by Zoom because of the big convention that's happening in downtown San Francisco. It kind of makes getting around a lot more of a challenge. So, and just to reduce the impact of adding more people on the street at that time. So.
Great. So there'll be a meeting tomorrow then.
Yeah, our chair-elect, or hopefully chair-elect candidate, Billy Ramos, and anybody who would like to attend from the North Bay can meet at American Canyon City Hall. I'll have a Zoom meeting there.
Very good.
Right.
So American Canyon City Hall.
Yes.
Okay, very good. And it is my understanding that Supervisor Ramos will be the next ABAG president, is
Yes.
my understanding,
Right.
which we send her congratulations. And it's great to have that local
Be formalized
representation.
at the meeting tomorrow.
Very good. Okay, formalized tomorrow. Excellent. Okay, and I don't know, Laura, Danielle, Member Pedrosa is not here. Do you know if there's an MTC update?
Yes, I can provide an MTC commission update. So the MTC commission approved appointment of the Regional Network Management Customer Advisory Committee group, which is part of the regional network management to oversee the kind of transit seamless Bay Area transit system connectivity and Terry Scott representing Napa, who's also on the Policy Advisory Council, will be on that group representing Napa County. And then on the Executive Director report for MTC received a 2022 Caltrans Excellent in Transportation Award for All Aboard Bay Area Transit campaign initiated by the Blue Ribbon Task Force and Transit Recovery Task Force, and working with all the Bay Area's 27 transit agencies. In October, MTC began mailing invitations to the Bay Area residents to participate in Bay Area Travel Study. So it's going out to 750,000 households in the Bay Area, which will receive invitation to participate in, I believe, a pretty extensive household travel survey, and we will be able to receive the data on that travel survey. So that would be good for our planning purposes. And on the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority side, approved their business plan equity framework and funding programs with the goal of creating bold regional solutions for Bay Area's housing challenges. The principal means for BAFA's business plan is a regional revenue measure across the ballot on all 9 Bay Area counties. The last component of the business plan, which will provide a recommendation for a self-sustaining agency, will be presented in November or December of this year. And for the joint MTC Planning Committee and ABAG Administrative Committee, they approved the priority sites, of which American Canyon and the city of Napa both have priority sites, which are places of mixed income and affordable housing complemented by on-site or nearby essential services and served by frequent transit. So following the approval of the priority sites, they'll be eligible for current and potential future funding from Plan Bay Area 2050. And update on Plan Bay Area 2050 draft blueprint. The development is underway, including core planning assumptions and potential strategy refinements informed by public engagement. And staff has informed the jurisdictions or the county of the 9 Bay Area counties that the revenues for Plan Bay Area 2050 are significantly reduced over the life of the plan compared to previous plans. And so that will come with some reductions in transportation funding. Programming and allocations recommended, approved the Community Action Resource and Empowerment Program, which is called the CARE program. This program is replacing the Lifeline program that was administered by NVTA, but this is going to be directly administered by MTC, and they will collaborate with NVTA and the local jurisdictions. There is a $1 million minimum allocation to Napa County for this program and for projects that improve equity priority communities. And so MTC staff will work with NVTA staff on rolling that out in the next few months. And that concludes the MTC report.
Thank you for providing that. Do we have any members with any updates they'd like to provide? Okay, then moving on to our next item, which is the Executive Director update. And of course, Danielle, you're here in Kate's absence.
Yes.
She's in a conference, just so everybody
Correct.
knows. She's in a
Yes.
conference.
So Director Miller has been reelected to serve a 4th term on the California Transit Association's Executive Committee. And so that is why she is not here this afternoon. So she is actually in Southern California attending the CTA conference. So that is good for, the Vine transit system and NVTA, as well as Bay Area small operators, because she's representing all of us. The draft environmental document for the Napa Valley Forward project, which is reviewing improvements at intersections at Oakville Crossroad and Rutherford Road, will be released later this month. We were going to circulate it probably the week of November 27th, right after Thanksgiving is when I've heard it will be circulated. We will send out the notice to the board as well as all of our jurisdictions and stakeholders, but that's a important milestone step for that project. So that's very exciting. The California Transportation Commission staff recommended that SR 37 receive $50 million for a Tole Creek bridge replacement under the Local Transportation Climate Adaptation Program. And so this, coupled with the $155 million that Novato Creek Bridge recently received from the IIJA, is very big win for the Resilient 37 suite of projects. So congratulations to MTC and Caltrans and all the CTAs involved in that. And about 3/4 of the Vine Trail, Calistoga to paving was completed at the end of October. The trail is still not open, but this is a milestone step for that project. And we hope that it will be open in spring of 2024. On the staffing front, Dario DeFide has accepted a position with St. Helena. So we're sad to see him go, but congratulations to St. Helena. And he was our senior accountant. So we are recruiting for a senior accountant. If you know anyone, send them our way. And we're happy to announce that our Vine riders can now receive text messages, because right before the meeting, I received a text message alert about the Route 10. And I said to Rebecca, oh, we can receive text messages. So if you're a Vine rider, please go on to the app or the website and you can register to receive live text message updates, which I think is quite exciting for our ridership. And I think that concludes our executive director report.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated. Okay, moving on to item 8, and this is a Caltrans update. Is Caltrans on? They're online. Okay,
Well,
excellent.
Anthony may be providing a Caltrans update. I know that member Sedgley did request a specific update on the Tolle Bridge. And so I do believe Amani is going to bring back a presentation at our next meeting, whether it be December or January, on that specific, or Tulakay Bridge. So I say Tolle Creek. I was getting 37. Yes. So Anthony will be providing the update, but I did want to mention that Amani would be here next meeting to provide a Tulakay Bridge update.
Thank you. Anthony, is that you? Is that who we're hearing right now?
Yes, that is correct.
Excellent.
Let me just,
Perfect.
I cannot open my video.
Yeah, and it looks like we're looking at the presentation here. So you're welcome to start anytime.
Okay. Okay. So there are 38 projects in this report. And then under project initiation report, there is 1 project, and under environmental, there are 9 projects. And can you move? Yeah, and those with yellow highlight, those projects has changed, has changes from the previous report. So for the environmental, it's those projects with changes are 4AC90, 0J890. Next slide, please. And then under design, there are 13 projects, and those with changes are projects 1Q620 and 2J88U. Next slide, please. Under construction, there are 15 projects under construction, and those with yellow highlights are projects 28120 and 0K000. Yeah, this concludes my report. Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony. Are there any questions for Anthony, Member Sedgley?
Well, just deciphering the different phases they're in under design. When it's under design and ready to list, is that listing it not for an RFP for construction, but it's ready to list? What does that actually mean? Ready to list under design in the Caltrans update?
Yes, that's a good question, meaning that all constraints, have been cleared, and it's ready for funding and advertisement.
Okay, so listing is funding sources and advertising for construction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Okay. Thank you, Anthony. We appreciate your update.
Thank you.
Moving on to consent items. There's 3 consent items, 9.1, 9.2, 9.3. Does any member want to pull a consent item? And if not, do we have a motion and a second to approve?
Move to approve, Garcia.
Second, Joseph.
Okay, we have a motion by Garcia, a second by Joseph. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Then moving on to presentations. We have 10.1 is the V Commute Challenge results. Drum roll, please. I have a feeling my member on my left here has done pretty well. Informational only presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Alessio, members of the board. I'm Diana Meehan, NVTA planner, and I'd like to introduce with me today Thea Selby. She's with Next Steps Marketing. There are consultants working with us for outreach on the V-Commute program. And I'm going to pass it off to Thea to give you all the good news on the 2023 V-Commute Challenge for this year.
Thank you, Diana, and we're extremely excited to be working with you. It's been a lot of fun so far. We started in about August, and things have been moving very quickly. So let's move to the second slide if we could here. Thank you. And we just kind of, you know what the V-Commute Challenge is, but this was the 23 challenge. And we tried to pull in different ways of promoting. And for one, we had a pledge. So we tried to get people to actually start by pledging to commute sustainably as a way of sort of pulling people in. We also created an employer and partner toolkits that we handed out to help them push out the word that this was happening. We had emails, we did social media, some really fun employee outreach, and tested for the first time targeted advertising. And I want to point to the picture there. That is my colleague Evis and your colleague Mariana. There was quite a bit of Spanish language outreach that we did over this period of time, which was September and October. So September, we focused on Transit Month, which is across the region. And October, we focused on rideshare, which is it's rideshare month in October. So we reached out to 570 registrants, 34 different employers across the region, 12 partner organizations, and of course, you, the NVTA board. So thank you, all of you who did participate. We really appreciated that. So we wanted to show you a little bit about, we're call to action marketers. That's what we do. That's our sort of, we try to get people to do things is what I say most basically. And so this is kind of our process of how we get people to do things. We start by getting something that allows us to push out information to them, and emails tend to be a really good way to do that. Then this pledge, when you pledged, then you feel good about yourself because you are commuting sustainably, you're a good person. So that's a good place to start. And really interestingly, as we'll see later, many people who pledge then turn into registrants. So we have a wonderful system called V-Commute Ride Amigos, which is a software, and they'll sign up, which is really what we want them to do. Pledge, then sign up, and then most importantly, which I keep looking at Director Shuto because she was a wonderful participant in all this, you log your trips. And that's when you go and obviously, whether you're carpooling or biking or on transit or however you might get around in a van pool, you log those trips and you get rewards, you have fun, you know what to do. I did want to read, we had two fabulous winners of our September and October. September was a gentleman who works at MCC. I don't know if you guys know that particular employer. October was a Napa Community College, Napa Valley Community College student. So we love the variety there. And our September winner, Russell, said, we switch drivers week to week. On my week to drive, I drive a mile away from my work to pick up my carpool buddy. It's worth it to then drive the next 36 miles to save money, car wear, and the environment. If I can do it, anyone can. So we push these things out also in our emails just to make people feel kind of positive about what's going on. So that's our process. Moving on to pledge data. So this year we got 107 people to pledge, and about 50% of the people who pledged then registered. And that's a really good data point. So if we can get more people to pledge, we can get more people to register. And it's all about, spreading the word and getting more people involved. I want to point you to the link right there. There's a little link. If you haven't had the chance yet to pledge, you can click, thank you for that cursor. You can click on that link and pledge to commute sustainably. It continues to this, it'll continue. Our pledging is continuing throughout. And that's one of our advertisements. Okay, so what you've all been waiting for, the challenge results. So we saw an increase of about almost 3 times in terms of how many participants we had. Our trips went up almost double, the distance over 3 times. A lot of money saved, and then CO2 savings as well. And finally, for those of us who care about active transportation, of course, a heck of a lot, all those bikers out there and walkers and scooters and all those things were burning all those calories. So that's a really good thing as well. So this is the mode share. You can kind of see, and this makes good sense, that carpooling is the number one, both in miles, which is the inner circle, and the outer circle as participants. You know, biking is very, very big, as you can see on the outside as well. Telework counts. So if you are not going to work, but you're working from home, you can log that non-trip, because what we're trying to do is to get people to reduce congestion, right? And if you're working from home, then you are reducing congestion. So 11% of our mode share was in telework, and then you can see a little bit in bus and carpool 3+, which is pretty impressive, is also quite large. So what did we learn in this, at least for Next Steps Marketing, our first commute challenge? It's so very important. You have amazing employers here in Napa Valley and in Napa County, and partnering with them is really key. And actually, that's what we're going to be focusing on in November and December, is really deepening our relationships with your employers, figuring out ways to make sure that they are getting the word out to their employees, because it's a really great way to be able to do that. Some community events were amazingly effective. Participant in was amazing, terrific, you know, a lot of obviously Latino participation. We signed up a bunch of people. It was just a great event. Taking the pledge is effective, as I mentioned. If we get a 50% uptake in taking the pledge to becoming a registrant, that is a great way to move the needle. And our emails are actually well received. We have a 53% open rate compared to, on average, about 20%, and 7.55 click-through rate. And that could be considered okay at 1%. So 7.5 people are interested. They're interested in, you know, the people that we have on board. We want more people, but the people who are there are interested. So then we just go to some of our recommendations for the future. These you've sort of heard before. We want to deepen that engagement with employers. We're going to continue weekly and monthly drawings. Diana, do you want to talk a little bit about the holidays?
Sure. We've been talking. We have some funds remaining in our Tango program. So the way we distribute rewards is through something called Tango Card. In the old days, we used to run out and purchase actual gift cards and then have to go and hand over these gift cards to people who were getting rewarded. It's now all electronic, using a technology platform called Tango. It has everything from Amazon to Airbnb, including 501c3 nonprofits, if you're feeling generous and want to give your reward to a nonprofit. So we're going to continue the drawing. Now the holidays are upon us, and we're going to do some holiday hero rewards. And in the past, we used to allow people to accumulate points and cash their points in. We're stretching the fund dollars for rewards by doing drawings instead. So we're gonna bump that weekly drawing for the course of November and December to $100. You have the potential, if you're using alternative commuting, to be rewarded up to $100 over the course of November and December. And then we're going to continue this reward program ongoing, as opposed to just annual through the commute challenge. We're going to keep this ongoing while we can sustain the funding for this. And so that'll be a $50 weekly reward drawing over the course. And then, we'll review next time that we'll be looking at the budget this coming spring, talking about how much we want to commit to the program. We've had a lot of success. We started when we first hired Next Steps Marketing. I think we had about 270 registrations. We have 1,115 registrations so far on VCommute in just a few short months. So it's proving to be quite effective. And now what we're looking for is participation. And hanging out that reward carrot is definitely something that motivates people to do the good behavior with the idea that they could get a reward for this. They'll just continually do the right thing and log the trips, whether they win or not. They're doing it, and that becomes habit. And that's really what we're talking about largely with this program is behavior change. A lot of people want to do the right thing. They don't know how to do it. The platform is really designed to help you do this. Find a carpool buddy, even if you have to go a few minutes out of your way. You're only driving 1 week out of the month instead of all 4. It's a benefit to a lot of people, and also helps with keeping employees employed. People, employers are always looking for ways to keep their employees happy. If you've got a long commute and you only have to drive 1 week out of a month, it's pretty sustainable for a lot of folks. So lastly, is that the last slide? I think that's the last slide.
That is the last slide.
We want to, since you're our board members, you're not eligible for rewards, but we can give you some bragging rights. So we have something for Director Anna Chateau for being quite the hero.
Anna actually came in. She actually came in first for the September month, but of course, being a board member, she's not eligible to get her $500 prize. But this is even better, I think.
This is way better. Because who doesn't want to be a superhero?
Put it on.
Okay, I'll take your picture.
Okay.
There we
Yes,
go.
please.
Thank you.
I'm
honored.
Under the mask too.
You want me
You
to say?
please.
Okay, thank you so much. It was a little embarrassing to be wearing a cape talking to all of you, but it
also
really did help
awesome.
me. Well, it helped me change behavior because I think like so many people up here, we're so busy and it's just running from one thing to the next. And for me, it changed the thing. Like the gym is so close to my house. I add that bit back in after years of not going with COVID. And I realized I can ride my bike. I can walk there. And the best story happened the other day where one of my friends is working out with me and she said, I'm going to get my husband to come pick me up. I'm like, no problem. I've got you. And she's like, okay. I'm like, on my bike. We'll go together. I've got you. And we just walked and it was so close. And she's like, of course I can go to the coffee shop from the gym. I do not need to get into the car to do that in our small cities. I have found even going to City Hall, you can do it. Hair does not have to be perfect. Even when the weather is not great, you can wear gloves. And if we didn't have this commute challenge, I wouldn't have pushed through some of those barriers. Our mayor, Doreen, now we carpool here. And it's just been actually a big gift to have the time together in the car and get to know each other. So not only do you feel good about not using greenhouse gases and bringing that number down in our small way that does make a difference when we all work together, but it's been good for relationship building as well. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much
You
for
can
doing
hold
this
on to
program.
that cape and we can hand it around to the next
Yeah.
hero.
Well, you are a perfect spokesperson for this, Anna. And she did a lot on her social media to create awareness. So she didn't just talk it or just sign up. She did it. So
Thank you.
good job on that. I do have a question. I'm not wearing the cape, not because I didn't sign up, but because I didn't track. So, because I'm so busy and I'm not that best at logging and tracking, but I understand that the app does automatically track you, or how do we make this more easier for people who are just really busy?
It's
I mean,
super
Anna's
easy.
busy,
So,
but she's extra special.
you can track your trips using the platform, of course, but there is also an app and it's called Commute Tracker. So the way it works is you on the app, you have your regular commute, that you can call it your favorite commute. So from work from home to work. And it will, and your typical mode is if it's carpool, you put in carpool. If, over the course of those 5 days during the work week, you took your favorite commute, all you have to do is say yes, and it'll log all those trips for you, one click.
Okay.
On using the app. Or you can go in daily and say, instead of carpooling, that, one of the days you rode your bike. Instead, you can adjust that and just hit yes. So, there's a variety of ways that you can, and you can go in, on Saturday morning. It takes about 5 minutes. If you took your regular, you just click through the days and hit okay. It'll say log a dozen trips and you say yes and log them all. Yeah. So you can
Okay.
go in after the fact and
You could do
log.
it today if you wanted to. It's not too late.
Okay,
We'd love-
all
we'd love
right.
to see that.
Well, I know that there's members here, such as Member Sedgley, who's often on his electric bike and he'll even walk from his house, which is North Napa, to City Hall sometimes. We've commuted a lot, but we never logged anything. I doubt it, right? Yeah.
Yes, by all means,
So-
if you're doing it already, you should register and log your trips.
Yeah.
It's good data for us too. We can see what difference it's really making. And you saw by the chart on there that the amount of the level of greenhouse gas emission reductions based on the trip type, and that's how it's calculated under the platform. So, you get a greater reduction for biking than you do for carpooling, but it still counts. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's great. Well, I know it brought awareness and some behavior change here, even though we weren't logging it, but that's fantastic. Member Garcia.
Thank you for the presentation. That is really good results to see there. A couple things, just encouraged to see that they'll continue to go forward with it. Periodic report out to all of us certainly helps it. We had a great meeting with it's called Green Island Road Industrial Area. Thank you for being there. That's working with the employers in that area to help increase that knowledge on it and get people to commute. It's very handy to have that out there. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so vcommute.org moves on. Oh, Member Vice Chair
I want to
Joseph.
register the same concern that Chair Alessio did. Logging the trips was a kind of a headache for me, and maybe on the desktop version, it isn't as intuitive as the mobile app, but it was frustrating to try to log in a location. And so for whatever reason, I ended up saying, screw it. So I did all my
You should always
walking and
contact us.
Yeah.
Donna.
So-
We're here to help.
So at any rate, if there's an easier way to make this happen, maybe the mobile app is better than the desktop model.
Commute tracker.
Commute
That's
tracker.
that's your app. And soon to be also in Spanish, which is an issue because a lot of
Very
our participants are Spanish speaking.
And in that regard, is there data to distinguish participants by language, for example, so we can say how well are we impacting Spanish-speaking communities?
But really our only data is, when we make those connections through, you saw a photograph of outreach events. And so we send Spanish speaking staff to those events to communicate. And we know how many registrations we had for the day for those groups. But it is a barrier. One of the things that we learned at Dia de la Familia was that a lot of folks, a lot of workers are not using, they all have smartphones, but they don't use email, which we found kind of interesting, that they prefer to use a smartphone or texting. So we're in conversations with Right Amigos right now about whether or not they can make some adjustment with the app or with the platform to be able to allow text messaging for confirmation, if there's a way that they can do that. So we're hoping that that's going to be the case in the future. We definitely, this is a public-based platform. We're looking to serve the community with this, and what the community is asking for, we want to try to give them. And we want it to be as easy as possible. So you don't get to that, this is too much trouble, I don't want to do it. So it's making me hear that we need some more and better information on how to do this. There are 3 short videos on the vcommute.org website that show you how to register. I think they're like 1.5, 2-minute videos, how to log trips, all those sorts of things. And there's even a way if you inadvertently logged a trip that you didn't mean to, you can go in and change that. And I think there's information on how you go in and make an adjustment. But, again, time is of the essence. People don't have a lot of it these days. And the easier it can be, the better. And I think the more that people will use it. And after a while, like Director Chateau said, it becomes intuitive. If you've done it enough times, it becomes kind of a habit or behavior. But I think that this is the thing where technology is concerned, is looking for ways to serve the community that simplifies it for them, where they don't have to
Yeah.
think too much, pressing one button and it says, yes, that's pretty easy. Yeah. But learning how to do that, how do you first get in there and get it going? Yeah.
And given the fact that you all have your audiences being, elected officials across the county, we would love it if you could, this thing that Diana just announced with the $100 weekly, if you wouldn't mind, if you have an email, e-newsletter or something like that, that's going out in the next couple of weeks. If you could maybe put it in there, we'd really appreciate it, because you reach so many more people than we possibly could. So most likely we'll be sending
We'll send an
something.
email.
Yeah, we'll send an email, and if you can possibly add a little blurb, we'd really appreciate it.
And thank you for that. And what I think is great too, is if maybe there was a fun video that we could share. It could just be real spontaneous, and then just provide a couple of the bullet points, things really short, 30 seconds, and we could share that out. We can even have Member Chateau be our with
her hero cape.
our hero cape on. But that's a great way to reach people too. Yes, Member Garcia, and then we'll move on to our next item.
Yes, thank you for that. That's, if you could mail that or email that, contact Valerie Zizak Moraes, the Chamber of Commerce CEO, to get out all the members that are in the chamber. And I'd like to commend Director Joseph for, he walks from his house to city council meetings. But it's not flat ground. He lives on top of Cookie Hill. So he gets a good cardio workout in the process as well.
For you.
Thank you. And I do, so we have one more comment. Iris?
Yes, Iris Lopez from Calistoga. Reaching out to the communities, have you been done some reach out into Calistoga, or will be possible for you to come and do a presentation maybe in one of our council meetings, and we can have some advertisement in our local newspaper, because I don't think the community knows very much about this program.
We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and congratulations. And we look forward to the next update with even more impressive numbers and a crown to go with Member Chateau's cape. Moving on to presentation number 2. This is the 2024 State Legislative Update. Steve Wallachop is here with Platinum Advisors. Looking forward to hearing your update. Steve, saw you patiently waiting in the back. Thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Steve Walker, Platinum Advisors in Sacramento, here to give an update of.
Not sure your mic is working.
Maybe just get closer to it.
There you go.
Yeah. To give you an update on activities in Sacramento this past year and kind of look forward. So this past year, for the first time in several years, we had a deficit, which was normal for years, and then they kind of went away. And so it was a little bit of a shock to kind of get back into the cut mode. So we had about $15 billion deficit. They were able to bridge that. A lot of it by doing transfers, eliminating some of the spending they approved in the prior year, and moving forward. Next year, we're looking at probably another deficit. We don't know how bad yet. One of the complications going into next year on the fiscal side is the IRS, as well as the State Franchise Tax Board, delayed because of all the disasters and weather-related events last winter. The filing of tax returns first to October 16th. Now it's November 16th. So when they, at the last minute, went from October to November, it did kind of, people did delay. They didn't pay the taxes that they were expecting. So right now we don't know how far short we may or may not be. So right now, I think October was supposed to generate about $42 billion in that month because of that delay. We're now looking at about $27 billion short that we need to make up for in November. So it's quite possible we can get that. These are all the very high net worth earners in California that pay a substantial share of the state's tax revenue. So we'll find out. Hopefully tomorrow by Friday, have a better idea of where things stand. With that, there's a lot of the outlooks that are based on those revenues. The Legislative Analyst's Office always gives out a mid-year fiscal analysis of where we stand. That usually comes out in November. They're going to delay that to December. We don't know what the impact is going to have on the governor's budget. That has to be released by January 10th. Because, you know, they're waiting for numbers to kind of finalize their agreement going into next year. So in this past year, you know, I think with the budget wise, I think most significant piece of it for us in the transportation world is SB 125. This is a bill that kind of restored some money that the governor proposed to cut for transit. And kind of shuffled around other funding pots to give more money directly to transit with the option of doing either operations or capital. Most of these plans are usually put together by the regions because that's where the money is going to flow. And I think MTC is kind of putting that together right now. In the Bay Area, it's more difficult for us here in the North Bay to compete with some of the bigger capital projects in the region. So I think there's agreement has been reached that they're going to proceed with there. In addition to SB 125 is the formation of what they call a Transit Transformation Task Force. Assemblywoman Friedman, who chairs the Assembly Transportation Committee, has tried for a couple of years to kind of get something like this started. It was finally incorporated as part of this budget agreement. And right now, the California State Transportation Agency is supposed to announce the members of that task force in the first part of December and have their first meeting by mid-December. They have a deadline to get a report back to the legislature by October 25th or October 2025. And analyzing a wide range of issues. I mean, just everything you can think of facing public transit, it's going to have to be addressed. Either a review of the current service levels, current funding levels, and where those funds come from, how to coordinate better, how to coordinate fares better, services better. Everything you think of that's been addressed or discussed, particularly in the Bay Area region, which I think is kind of far ahead of other parts of the state in this, will be part of that report. And they're also going to look at how to create a more stable long-term funding source for transit. So we're kind of looking forward to that. In addition, you know, with this transit funding that came through with the state, you know, for the Bay Area, it still fell short of what was needed to kind of bridge that transit operating gap. So Senator Wiener earlier this year did introduce a measure to have a temporary toll increase to fund transit for the next, I think it was like 5-year period. That bill did not move forward, but I think he's still, it's a long shot measure. But I think he's still trying to keep the spotlight on the issue for transit funding. He has the chair of a select committee in the Senate on Bay Area transit operations. So he's going to have a hearing on November 27th at the MTC boardroom to kind of look at what it means if funding is not secured, what kind of transit service operations are going to need to be cut, service levels will be reduced, and how to, you know, what is the future going to look like if we don't bridge that gap in order to try and keep the spotlight and pressure on people to try and address that funding need in the Bay Area, throughout the Bay Area, as well as in the state. But his main focus right now, I think, is just on in the MTC region. Other measures that we kind of worked on pretty actively was AB 557. This is a bill on the Brown Act. There were several Brown Act bills. Some got signed, some didn't. Some, I think, made it more complicated than it ever has been in the Brown Act legislation. AB 557 is one that, you know, basically just extends permanently the emergency provision. So if there's a state of emergency, you can meet remotely. And those provisions that were enacted a few years ago were going to sunset. So this bill just kind of eliminated that sunset and made a few other tweaks in there. So at least that is done. Other Brown Act bills may come back next year. There's one for kind of countywide boards being able to go remotely. It's, I mean, to me, I'm not an expert on the Brown Act, but reading that bill we made it, I think, more complicated than the existing law that we have to operate under. So we'll be on the lookout for that, what happens next. And then one of the things that for kind of policy wonks and transportation wonks like me is the passage of ACA 1. This is a measure that I thought would never happen. They did get the 2/3 vote to put it on the ballot. It would lower the vote threshold to 55% for local bonds and taxes and parcel taxes if they meet certain conditions. There's certain parameters or how that would be used. It doesn't allow for the money to be used for like transit operations, but it has to be used for capital projects, housing type projects. But transit capital projects and transportation projects are an eligible expense. We do expect next year legislation to be introduced to kind of clarify several provisions in the constitutional amendment. That would, how it would be implemented, and what, certain audits that are required in the bill. If you give them the state auditor, what do they do with them? So they give that kind of clarification. But ACA 1 by Assemblywoman Aguirre Curry will be on the ballot in November of next year. And so we'll see how things go. But it was a nice surprise this year to see that get moving forward. Next year is going to be another kind of exciting year. Like I said, we don't know fiscal outlook, but it doesn't look particularly good as of right now. But we do have kind of new leadership in the legislature. In July of this year, Assemblyman Rivas became the new Speaker of the Assembly. With that, there weren't significant changes yet. Assemblywoman Aguirre Curry was named Speaker Pro Tem, so she kind of heads the floor activities on the Assembly floor, which is it's a good position to have her in. But other changes regarding committee memberships have not been announced yet. There's right now, even this afternoon, I was getting texts on lots of rumors about who's going to be chairing which committee. But that official announcement we expect to come out first part of early December timeframe. And then on the Senate side, we will have at some point a new pro tem. Senator Atkins, the current pro tem, terms out next year. They have selected Senator Mike McGuire to be the next pro tem, which would be nice to have. The first time in a while we've had two people from Northern California controlling both chambers. And so they're still working out the details of when his tenure will start. I'm sure he wants to start in January. I'm sure there's to be somewhere between there and June. So it's going to be an exciting time, at least for the transition there. I think that's it. If anybody has any questions, I didn't want to go through that whole list of bills, but if you have questions about any of those bills that are on the list, please let me know.
Thank you. And I see we have a question from Vice Chair Joseph.
A real quick question on ACA 1 versus the California Business Roundtable proposition. Is there some kind of a system in place that says who wins?
Well, that's an interesting question, because the one thing I should have brought up was the other constitutional amendment that was passed by the legislature this year, which was ACA, is it 13 or 14, something like that? What it would do, and it would be on the November ballot as well. So everyone, the Business Roundtable has an initiative that qualified. It would dramatically change and increase conditions on the ability to raise any fees or taxes at the state or local level. And it would basically almost put a halt to it. Everything would be at least a 2/3 vote and a public vote on just about everything. So that is eligible to be put on the ballot in November. They have until like June timeframe to decide whether they want to pull it off the ballot or not, the sponsors of that. But the other ACA that the legislature try and counter that effort is to require, if an initiative that is put on the ballot by signature raises the vote threshold of a tax, then that initiative must also pass by that same vote threshold. So this would increase things to 2/3 vote, so that the Business Roundtable initiative would have to have a 2/3 vote approval before it take effect.
So using that for the ACA 1 that puts a 55% threshold, it would need to get a 55% approval?
The distinction I think is that constitutional amendments placed on the ballot by the legislature, it doesn't apply to. Only initiatives that are placed on the ballot. So it gets a little, they're getting pretty tricky. I assume there will probably be some kind of legal challenge to it, but we'll have to wait and see.
Well, thank you.
The concern I hear with ACA 1, and I'm to me, I think that sounds like a positive move forward, but the concern is that it's going to be a conflict with Prop 13. And that Prop 13, it makes it vulnerable for that to be turned over in the future. Is that something that you're hearing?
Well, I think
or is that legitimate? Is that a legitimate concern?
It doesn't, it changes. Basically ACA 1 is amending what Prop 13 put on in the Constitution. There's a new kind of section, the Prop 13 sections, the Prop 208, all those are still in the Constitution. But if you wanted to do this other process, is what ACA 1 would do, it would be a 55% vote. But there's much more oversight. There's limits on what you can spend it on. duration. I mean, you couldn't put one measure on the ballot for ACA1 approval and get it approved. And then before that money's even spent, put another one on the ballot. You would not be able to do that. So there's more restrictions. It doesn't, I mean, honestly, on the basis of it, yeah, it kind of provides a watered down or just a different path than Prop 13 path.
Okay.
I
I think we need to have a conversation. I need to learn more about that, but I appreciate your response.
Yeah. But it's
But
Prop 13.
that's what I keep hearing about in terms of any opposition to ACA1. It's the threat of Prop 13,
Well, I think
whether that's be real or not real.
yeah, I think the opposition is kind of concerned that it kind of undermines what was enacted by Prop 13,
Mhm.
those protections. But I think Prop 13 didn't just undermine, voter thresholds, but it changed voter thresholds. It also put a cap on the property tax, which is the biggest piece, which it doesn't do anything to that. So the 1% cap is still there.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wallach? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for being here, taking the time
Thank
to
you.
be with us today and for the update. Moving on to our federal representatives, we've got Jessica On and Tony Hobbs here from Platinum Advisors. And we had a chance to spend a little time together in DC last spring. Thank you for coming out to make the travels here to Napa. So again, this is going to be our 10.3 presentation on the 2024 Federal Legislative Update by Jessica On and Tony Hobbs, Platinum Advisors.
Hi, everyone. Jessica Ani. So great to see you all. We love coming out to Napa. So happy to anytime. Throughout the year, one challenge we've continued to see is internal disagreements within the House Republican caucus, kind of causing roadblocks and issues as the Congress attempts to pass their legislative priorities, especially with appropriations, as well as other kind of must-do items, the Farm Bill, NDAA, FFA reauthorization. This really started with the beginning of President Biden and then Speaker McCarthy's agreement on spending levels to raise the debt limit. Speaker McCarthy faced significant backlash from his caucus, and especially the House Freedom Caucus members, leading them to writing their appropriation bills at significantly lower levels than was agreed upon at that time. Just last week, we saw the House Republican leadership pull two of their bills because there was not significant support to pass them in the House within the Republican caucus. For example, with the THAD, which funds transportation and housing agencies, we've seen moderate members not wanting to support these bills because of the cuts of transportation programs, such as Amtrak. And then you also see members of the House Freedom Caucus who say these cuts do not go far enough. With just a 3-seat majority, this puts the majority in a very difficult position on how to move forward with funding the government and passing these bills. Last night, the House passed a laddered continuing resolution. This will continue funding the government, taking away a threat of a shutdown before the end of the year. They're putting in two deadlines. One is middle of January, and then the other in beginning of February. The thought process here is to separate the kind of bills into the less controversial and more controversial, giving them more time to negotiate on the more difficult bills, basically. They've never really done this before. It's kind of a new idea. This did fund the government at current levels, though, so it was able to gain support from members of the Democratic caucus, while members of the House Freedom Caucus did not vote for it. It's important to remember that this is exactly what happened with Speaker McCarthy. He put up this same CR and ended up losing his speakership. There are a fair amount of personal dynamics at play there that contributed to that, but it will be interesting to see if Speaker Johnson also faces backlash. The House Freedom Caucus seems to trust him more, and so may be able to give him kind of more leeway, understanding the difficulties of governing, but that really remains to be seen. You are now starting to see more moderate members of the caucus kind of speak out a bit, and where under McCarthy, they were really more willing to kind of go along with the plan, and now kind of saying that some of these cuts are too extreme. One bill we've really been focusing on with NVTA is the THAD because of the transportation programs. The House version does have significant cuts to the raise grant program, which was something that NVTA has been applying for. In the Senate version that passed with significant bipartisan support, they did not have these cuts. We're still a long ways away from getting to the point where the two chambers will negotiate on a final package. As I mentioned earlier, the House was not able to pass their transportation bill. But the kind of thought is here that because the Senate was able to pass it with such bipartisan support, there'll be a fair amount of leverage there as they begin to negotiate and kind of can start using the Senate version as more of a starting point. There's also some community funding projects requests in the House version of the THUD bill that we've been focusing on that Congressman Thompson and Huffman submitted that would provide some funding for State Route 37 and the Tully Creek project, repair project. And then, as I mentioned earlier, kind of the other main priority for us that we focused on this year, especially during the trip earlier this spring, was advocating for NVTA's race grant application and also working with members of the delegation to support and advocate for that application as well. Fortunately, we were not successful. We have seen this as a greater problem with California. Looking at last year's race grant awards, California only received 5% of the awards, which is quite small, especially given the population of California. So that'll be something that we'll continue to work on. Tony?
Yeah, so that kind of leaves us with, of course, where do we go from here? Which is a very difficult question, needless to say, to answer at the moment. However, I will kind of start with what we do know. As Jess said, we have two funding deadlines now that we're looking at. January 19th has 4 spending bills. Those include the Ag, FDA, and Rural Development, and the Transportation and Housing. Jess said the original plan here was to split these up into non-controversial bills and then controversial bills. Unfortunately, we've now hit this stage where Transportation and Ag have become controversial bills, despite not historically being so. So it will be very interesting to see, as Jess said, the dynamic as we go into this late winter and early spring, how members are going to navigate the fact that they now have 2 deadlines when we've just watched them struggle to meet 2 individual deadlines separately. As far as where the the THUD bill is going to go, right now the Senate's the only properly functioning body in Congress, to be perfectly blunt. They have a THUD bill passed. That is great for NVTA, because that means that the kind of rational heads have gotten out ahead of some of the more fringe elements of Congress. It remains to be seen what this conference process is going to look like. But I can say as a former House staffer that the way they traditionally go is that the Senate steamrolls the House and works its way on them as the upper chamber of Congress. I don't think that we're going to see anything too different this time around. That said, I remain relatively skeptical that splitting these up into 2 deadlines is going to solve the underlying problems that we've seen over the past 6 to 8 months. And that begs the question, what then? We've heard talk of a full year CR being bandied about. We've also heard people say that we've never had a full year CR. That's not entirely actually accurate. We have had full year continuing resolution. Sorry, a CR is a continuing resolution.
Thank you.
My apologies.
Just want to make sure.
Yes.
I'm like,
Continuing resolutions are like what we've just passed now, these short-term funding measures. The idea being that technically Congress could pass one that simply extends FY23 funding straight through the entirety of FY24, and they scrap this year and then try again and pick up in FY25. That would obviously be very damaging to a lot of programs. Agencies are very good at navigating temporary CRs. They're very good at kind of delaying their awards and making sure that they wait until they actually have the money in the bank. But a full year CR takes that off the table. They would have to withhold putting out offers for awards or for grant programs if that were the case. There may be some exceptions there because the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that was passed did some multi-year appropriations for some programs. So there will be some programs that can still give money, but there will be quite a big shuffling through if we do see that. Back in 2011, 2013 as well, we saw some of these partial full year CRs where some spending bills were CR'd, while, for example, the defense bill was passed as a whole new separate package. That is also something that's on the table. We've never had a year where the defense bill did not get passed. That is typically a very popular piece of legislation. So there will be any infinite combination of some bills getting CR'd and some bills receiving their full year appropriations. These are all possibilities that Congress is going to be looking at, and they have I tried to do this math a little earlier with all the vacations and everything. You know, we're talking about 6 weeks of actual work in which to do it between now and the end of January. And with that optimistic ending, we'll be happy to take any questions.
I think my question is, you know, is this a consequence of the 2024 election that we're going to see, presidential election? Is there just a lot of political play and pull and infighting, if you will? And that's kind of the root of it. And when we get past, will things calm down, or will it just continue? I
I'll
mean,
take a first crack.
yeah.
I'll take a first
I
crack.
mean,
So
it's like a personal
being a bit-
opinion I'm
yeah,
asking,
bit
but I'm
speculative,
just
of course.
wondering.
But let me, here's the thing. Typically elections blow up policymaking. Members revert back to their native, whatever got them elected, and they stop kind of caring about the nuts and bolts of governing. I think we may actually see a reversal this time around. The fact that members now have to go home and justify what they've been doing for the last 10 months to their constituents. We just saw a Republican member on the floor of the House today berating his own leadership because he says he has absolutely nothing to go home to and to campaign on with his constituents. So we're going to start to see a little bit of that pressure building up for members in both parties, because Democrats are not going to get off the hook on the "you've got nothing, done nothing for us these last 2 years" accusation that's going to come down. So I do think the election may actually spur a little bit additional policymaking, which
Okay.
would be counterintuitive, I think, to most years.
Okay, that's positive news.
Yeah, I agree. Members are going to want to have those community funding projects to go home and campaign and talk about their districts for their election. I would say the one other thing is, at this point, you have we're seeing a lot of the members who've been here a long time that want to do work and want to accomplish things. You're seeing them retire. You're seeing a lot more of the members who want to tweet and go on the news and aren't as serious. That's concerning for kind of doing business as usual. So I think, you know, we'll see, but I think you could see that, but I think also with the members that are leaving, I think is concerning, and it's sad to see.
Yeah. And what comes to mind, if you don't mind me saying this, is that what's more important is the reality show. That's not reality. And they're not getting real with the needs of our communities. Anybody? Yes, Vice Chair Joseph.
Yeah, I think whether or not we'll ever have an adult Congress is an interesting story, but we won't go there. You made a comment about how California is getting a relatively small share of the raise monies, which perked my ears up to say, okay, what is it? I mean, do we not know how to, ask for money well, or what's wrong?
There's a lot of, I don't want to say like why that's occurring, because there's a lot of factors that go into how these decisions are made. One issue I think is climate is such a priority for this administration. And when they're going and looking through these projects, looking at the climate benefits is a major factor they're looking at. California is so ahead on this issue that I worry we're being penalized. I'm from Tennessee. Tennessee's never done anything with climate until there's a lot of low hanging fruit there, where you guys probably did that 10, 20 years ago.
And
So
we've
that's
seen-
something I think.
Yeah, sorry. We've seen that on the technical side with some of the grant applications where demonstration projects and things for new advanced technologies aren't being accepted because there are so many states in the South. I'm from New England, where it's a little bit different, but we have a lot of states that just haven't been doing what California has been doing proactively. And the federal government does see this kind of rising tide brings all ships up approach to this type of governing. So there's also been, frankly, as a former staffer who wrote these letters, you have folks like the New England delegation screaming at the top of their lungs that California gets special attention and everything, and that money needs to go elsewhere. So there is some regional competition that's taking place as well.
Well, thank you. That's very insightful and intriguing. I guess it's good to know that we're doing such a bang up job that we aren't getting access to resources, but thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Okay. Do we need to ask for public comment? Not on the informational item. We do. Do we have any public comment? Okay. Well, thank you again for making a trip. Hopefully you'll find a nice little restaurant to relax at tonight. Do you leave tomorrow back to DC?
Tomorrow morning.
First thing.
Okay. Well, we appreciate your travels and your time for being here.
Thank you.
So much.
Moving on to our regular items, 11.1. This is an action item. And I know we had one member that had to leave for another meeting. Do we still have a quorum?
We do.
Thank you. Let's see. So this is 11.1, and this is the 2024 Federal and State Legislative Advocacy Program and Project Priorities and Federal State Legislative Update by Danielle. And you can find these pages 90 to 124.
Yes, Danielle Schmitz here to present 11.1, and just to follow our federal and state advocates. We do annually ask the board to approve our federal and state legislative platform and priorities, and this gives staff direction as well as our consultants directions on different policies and programs and projects to advocate for at the state and the federal level. So much of the legislative platform for the 2024 year is similar to 2023. Attachment 2 does have some minor red line version changes for the state advocacy piece, including broadening some of the language around electrification into zero emission fuel sources in general. Just as you noted, we have retrofitted or are retrofitting our maintenance facility for hydrogen fuel. So we just wanted to make sure that we encompass that within our platform. And there's some other minor red line changes there around Ting's bill, which was the transit, advocating for transit operating dollars, a kind of renewable source of those funds. So with that, Jessica and Tony and Steve provided a really good update from the state and federal sides, and we would just like the board's approval of our platform so we can, apply for the raise grants and go after different funding sources throughout the year.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions. Real question, among these priorities in terms of what was just talked about, the transit fiscal cliff that we're facing, is there anything in here to help us make that a priority legislatively? And if you can tell me a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, so advocating for new and sustainable transit operating funds, as Steve mentioned, with the Ting SB 125, which allocated almost $5 billion in new funds for transit operations. Facing this fiscal cliff, we are still working with MTC as well as our legislation and our lobbyists in looking at a source of transit funds that is sustainable beyond just being able to flex transit capital dollars to operating, which is what that has been about with the passage of the budget, the state budget most recently. We're looking at, ways to have a longer sustainable funding source for our transit operating.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get people to participate in our public transportation if we don't have enough transportation that's consistent and timely and just, occurring on a more regular basis, if you will, more times during the day, especially within the city of Napa. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No. Do we have a motion to approve these items? Moved by Shuto.
Second Garcia.
Second by Garcia. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed, so that passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is 11.2. This is also an action item. And this is purchase 6 EI Dorado 35-foot buses and related equipment. And Rebecca, thank you for presenting this. Pages 125 to 141 if you're looking for more material.
Thank you, Chair Alicio, members of the board. My name is Rebecca Schenk, and I am the transit manager here at NVTA and presenting on item 11.2. So as I'd mentioned in my last transit update last month, with an aging fleet and the number of missed trips due to mechanical issues rising, NVTA has been on the lookout for used vehicles really for over the last 12-month period. Transdev did finally find 6 CNG Eldorado XS 35-foot buses that were acquired as part of their recent purchase of First Transit, which is another transit operator they had recently acquired. The buses had been used by LAX for a period, but due to changes in their circulation plan, if you've been there recently, those buses were no longer needed. We're choosing used essentially because and these particular buses in particular is because we already have similarly aged CNG, which is natural gas Eldorado buses. Those buses have functioned well for us. We know how to maintain those buses. We have the parts for those buses. So we think this would be a good fit. They are also about 6 years through their useful life. So if you remember, we keep buses like these heavy duty ones for 12 years. So as opposed to say buying new CNGs that we'd have to operate for 12 years, we would only use these for 6. You can kind of think of them as a Band-Aid. So CARB does do this with their mobile source analysis branch. They look and do comparisons between, say, CNG and diesel buses from various years. And so, for example, they look really at the legal emission standards for engines that the EPA has been using basically and is updated, but has been using for certifying bus manufacturers. So they look at 2 things. They look at nitrous oxide and they look at particulate matter. So these buses would be replacing buses that are diesel from 2003 or earlier. So for example, with nitrous oxide, which is measured at grams per brake power, grams per brake horsepower hour, which is what the EPA uses. They are 4.0, for example, with a diesel bus from 2003, but with a CNG from 2010, that number goes down to 0.2. And in terms of particulate matter, which they also measure in grams per brake horsepower hour, it goes from 0.05 for a 2003 diesel vehicle down to 0.01. Now, understanding that these are not to zero in terms of the point source emissions that you might have with an electric bus, but we're moving forward. We're not moving backward, I guess would be the point there. And that there is some improvement on that front. Even when you look at federal funding sources, like they were talking about with low and no emissions, we've used those funding sources, for example, to buy electric vehicles in the past. That's how we bought the BYD vehicles. We operate in many of your jurisdictions, but the federal government does allow the purchase of CNG vehicles using that. So they're acknowledging, I guess, that between the standard diesel and that there is an improvement. The purchase that we're doing would be contingent upon kind of an inspection over a 5-day period by a third party. And so we are kind of doing our due diligence on these vehicles. In terms of what NVTA goals this would meet, it would basically be meeting the transportation needs of the entire community and providing more reliable transit service, particularly on those routes 10 and 11, which travel the length of Napa County, where we're currently using these 2002 and 2003 vehicles on those routes. In terms of funding, the total that we're asking for today is 1.84 million. These buses collectively would cost about 4.2 million. We'd be funding this through the Transportation Development Act funds that we have allocated for capital. The price that you're seeing includes the buses, painting them to our branding, putting the proper IT equipment in them, and then the inspection that I mentioned before. Alternatives beside the staff recommendation would be to forego the purchase of these Eldorado access vehicles and continue to operate our Gilligs from 2002 and 2003, assuming that they continue to operate. If they don't continue to operate over the 6-year period, then essentially we would be well below kind of the 20% spare ratio and risk further mechanical breakdowns en route. And so in terms of next steps, right, if this were approved today, then we'd move to paint the vehicles, do some seating rearrangement because they have luggage racks in them, and do our paint and ITS work. And I understand that this is not ideal from what it's worth on a personal level. I want to say I believe in climate change. I was sitting out there the other day and my husband was having a fix. I was removing all of the bristles from my toothbrush, right? Because you have the bamboo ones, you have to remove the bristles with the with a set of pliers essentially so that you can compost the bamboo part. I've taken all of the soccer balls after soccer practice this year on the bus. When they send you the short one, it's not good, but you can squeeze them on there with yourself. And when they do the annual updates from your insurer, I did drive less than 6,000 miles last year. So I'm on board, but I have to weigh that kind of with this kind of practical professional level where I need to say, okay, I'm making a decision here that I basically say missing service is worse than performing that service at this point in time with that CNG bus. And with that, I'll go ahead and take any questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. We know you're very, very mindful and NVTA, it is a priority for us to get to the zero emission electric buses. They're expensive, they're back ordered. We had a provider that went belly up, if you will, financially is no longer providing. So I think this is a very thoughtful approach personally. Yes, Member Eisenberg.
Thank you for the presentation. I certainly understand compromise and lessers of evil. But my question is, what is our 6-year plan? These will be non-functional in 6 years or minimally functional.
Yeah, I mean, I think our 6-year plan is, so at our last board meeting, we had approved the purchase of 8 Gilligs, which will arrive in year 2. They have 24 months. We have another round of funding that we won from the Lono program for 6 other vehicles. And I think in early 2024, we'll put that order in and we'll get those essentially in year 3 or 4. And then just continuing to make that funding push, right? So that we don't have an excess of vehicles that need replaced. And I think these 2 purchases, these 8 Gilligs with the bus and bus facilities, and then these 6 with Lono will put us on a decent track to go towards that.
Thank you for the question. Yes, Member Doring.
Thank you. I'm curious, is Transdev the actual owner or are they a broker? And if so, who is the actual owner seller? Our own operator is the owner of these.
Correct. They are currently the owner of them because when they acquired First Transit, this was part of what they owned. So, and normally when we would buy a used bus, we would have Transdev maintenance staff do the inspection on these buses. In this case, that does not make sense for the very reasons that you're asking that question. And so we had used a separate party, Trans World Services LLC, to do our inspections on the BYD buses. And we are, assuming this gets approved today, we would have them under contract to do the inspection of the Transdev vehicles to make sure the safety's in there, that we're not going to get them on day 1 and then need on day 2 to replace the transmission, et cetera. And so as long as the buses are in the condition we think they are, that would be the price under that 1.84 million. But if other repairs need to be made, we would negotiate that price accordingly based upon our third-party inspection.
And how is the price set?
In terms of the price set, we basically if you remember, we had a bus that was totaled anyways, it was $259, right? And we ended up buying used CNG, 253 that was done, and we got $259. So we've gotten some different quotes for used buses on that. So we had a good sense there of like what Eldorados were going for in the used market based upon that. And so we offered basically about $25,000 less per bus than we had in the prior year. And we kind of agreed on that as our baseline. And then in terms of the prices, for example, for painting and things like that, that's just going to be, individually billed out, or some things like putting the cameras in. We already have a contract for cameras and we buy cameras at a set rate.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Anybody else? Do we have a motion on the floor to approve this item?
So moved.
So moved by, excuse me. Thank you for the reminder. Is there any public comment on this item? Not seeing anybody new pop up either online or in the room. Okay. So we have a motion by Eisenberg. Do we have a second?
Second, Joseph.
Second by Joseph. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, and Rebecca, you're going to stay there because you're going to take us through our next item, which is 11.3. And this is our last regular item, Vine Transit Update, pages 142 to 151. And this is informational only.
Yes, thank you for sitting in through this one, and we'll try to wrap this up. So we're covering the first quarter, was essentially July 1st through September 30th of 2023. So especially in the city of Napa and the Route 10, this is basically a split period between 2 different things. So we operated 1 service from July 1st through August the 12th in the city of Napa that had 4 fixed route plus on demand. And then we made that transition on August the 13th, basically right before school started, to return to 6 fixed routes, or I should say 5 fixed routes of the limited area of on demand. And then in terms of the Route 10, it was also split along those same lines where we basically had 4 additional trips running between the 13th of August and September 30th. And then in terms of St. Helena and American Canyon fixed routes, with the start of school, we did reinstate those fixed routes. So those are the changes. This is a little bit of a melded quarter that we'll be comparing here. And the picture you'll see on the right is Dia de las Muertes, not to be confused with the Dia de Familia event they talked about before, but this is a second annual event in the city of Napa that was really well attended. We had kind of a prime spot there on the corner, and there's Dexter and Mariana at that outreach event. On the next page, you'll just see a map, right, of those 6 fixed routes that we included in the city of Napa, just as a little reminder in terms of our return to ABCs and that we are operating in the second half of this quarter. And so on the next slide, what you'll see is we're comparing the first quarter of 2024 to the prior quarter, which would have been in 2023, that went from April to June. And so, right, you see a lot of zeros because, for example, on the Route B, right, we didn't operate that till that August 13th date. But comparing to the prior quarter, we did see kind of a nice increase in our overall ridership in the city of Napa and gained about 3,706 riders there. So in the positive direction. On the next chart, I just try to break it down a little further, right? Because it's like, okay, we operated this new service. And so here, and I only do this for the city of Napa, but we're looking from August the 13th, a little later through October the 31st. So just a few weeks ago from 2022 to 2023. The purpose is just kind of to get, okay, just that period where we changed. So, there is a little less percentage difference when you compare it to the same quarter, say last year, as opposed to just the prior quarter. But again, we had about 2,000 additional rides. And so we do seem to get in some positive reaction there. We're never going to be, as you'll see on the next slide, kind of where we would like to be in terms of our passengers per revenue hour. And this is like a matter of efficiency. So we increased our ridership in this first quarter of 23-24. And so we're doing better in terms of efficiency than our prior quarter because we, it's not just ridership, it's ridership and hours. Because we increased our hours, we haven't quite seen in the first quarter of 23-24 an increase in efficiency. But again, we've only been operating the new service for a portion of that quarter. In our next slide, it breaks down that first quarter of 2024 into the individual routes. And so you will see that all of the fixed routes, whether we are operating them prior to August the 13th or after August the 13th, do all have kind of higher passengers per revenue hour than the Vine on-demand service that we've been operating previously. And so that's positive for us and kind of shows, it emphasizes one of the reasons that we made that change. On the next slide, we'll look at more of our regional service, right? The 10, 11, 11X, 21, and 29. We also saw positive increases in those between the prior quarter up to this quarter, and overall about 9,000 additional rides there, most of which on the routes 10 and 11, with the 29 really being, it could have gone either way. That passenger counter maybe didn't work, or you know what I mean, one way or another, but definite real increases on the routes 10 and 11 compared to the prior quarter. And then on the efficiency threshold, looking up the next slide in terms of the passengers per revenue hour, 10 and 11 continue to perform the strongest, but continue to be below the minimum threshold that we're looking for. In terms of community shuttles on the table on the next slide, comparing back one quarter, again, we do see an increase of about 960 rides and increases on Calistoga, Yountville, and American Canyon, with our only real decrease being in St. Helena. But that, in a way, if you imagine like the first, so much of their ridership is driven by schools. And if you imagine in that fourth quarter of 2023, you basically end up with June and being out of school in there. And then anyway, it's just how it plays out. I think usually in St. Helena's, they do a little worse on the fourth quarter than the third quarter, just due to the timing of schools. But we'll continue to monitor that to make sure that's not a new pattern for us. On the next slide, what you'll see in just in terms of passengers per revenue hour, and we know this, American Canyon continues to be our star performer there. And they have a limited number of hours and they make the best use of every hour. Their service ends at 5:30, and I know our riders often or drivers often stay after because they're finishing those last rides that might have been put in at 5:28. So we continue to see strong performance there. In terms of Vinego, we have essentially been on the next slide, which you'll see we've been flat over last quarter to this quarter. A lot of that being there were a number of COVID outbreaks at some of our senior facilities where they had shut that down service for a period of time. And so we just basically maintained flat service over that period of time. Actually, I was surprised it didn't go down just given the sheer number of days that some of those facilities had to shut down during the last quarter. And then next, we're going to look at kind of our overall picture, right? It continues to be a slow go. Some things like the Route of 11 just kind of continue to follow the exact pattern that you would like to see. Things like the Route 29, right after that initial drop, are just continuing to remain flat. And so we'll continue to try to emphasize ridership, especially on the most promising routes, being things like the Route 11, the Route 10, and with the changes in the city of Napa, hoping to continue to see improvement quarter over quarter. On the next slide, and what you'll see is that kind of the ridership change on the shuttles. Again, certain things following the perfect thing. For example, Vinego showed that, like we talked, it leveled off, but I would continue in the next quarter to see an increase there. We're continuing to recruit drivers on that Vinego front because we do see an increased number of calls and a number of people that want to be eligible. Calistoga had a strong quarter. They always do whenever it's tourist season, and so they performed as well in this last quarter. And then switching gears a little bit, one thing I want to talk about and the next slide in anticipation of our budget. So if you remember, we do 2-year budgets, and so we'll be going in fiscal year 24, 25, 25, 26, we'll be passing a new biannual budget. And looking at our NVTA's fare policy, basically it says that the board should be considering fare adjustments under 2 of the following scenarios. One, if NVTA or the Vine has failed to meet its fare box recovery goals, and that's set out by our Transportation Development Act funding of 15%. Now, those thresholds are currently relaxed through 2026 under state legislation, but we want to keep them in mind because that date could come up to surprise us at some point. Or then the other thing would be every 3 years to consider a fare adjustment basically based upon inflation, and it goes into some further detail there. So on the next slide, you'll see a little bit of a history of our fare change. So luckily, the person that did the memo in 2006 gave us a great history. I didn't want to include all of that, but I basically tried to get where we were at different 10-year increments. So if you'll see pre-85, it was a good deal. But if you look at 2014, that's the last time that we changed our fares. So we did not change our fares in 2018. I don't think that we brought anything to the board, from my understanding. And then in 2021, during COVID, it didn't seem kind of the right time. So it has been 10 years since we raised our fares. This would not affect our community shuttle pricing at all. It just kind of has a different set of requirements. So this would be for our local fixed routes as well as for our regional and express routes. If you go to the next slide, this would be kind of the steps where we would explore a fare change. So this is November, it's not even on there. What we would do in December is we would prepare this Title VI analysis under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which would basically look and make sure we weren't negatively impacting particular groups protected under the Civil Rights Act. Then in January, we would present to our Citizens Advisory Committee and our Paratransit Coordinating Council a proposed fare increase. In February, we'd come to the board with a public hearing. It would be open for 30 days and people could comment on a proposed increase in fares. And then in March 24, the board of directors would choose whether or not to approve a fare increase. And then that would go into effect on July 1 of 2024 based upon our next year budget. Kind of roughly what we're thinking in terms of the fare change. And I'll talk a little bit more, I guess, on terms of the case for the fare change next. But the CPI, which is one of the two reasons that we can change our fares. If you look at it, basically based upon that increase in 2014, $1.60 equals $2.07 in 2022, based upon the CPI specific to our region. And so we've also seen an increase in transit expenditures, not necessarily over each of the last 3 years, but now as we're ramping up service, when you look at 2019, looking to 2022, 23, we're seeing an increase in our cost of purchase transportation combined with the cost of the increase in fuel. As we mentioned, we have a fare box recovery ratio set by statute of 15%. That's relaxed through 2026. But in fiscal year 22, which is the last year we have audited data available, we were just about 9%. I expect that number will be higher in 23, but it's not like it's going to blow 15% out of the water. So it's something we want to kind of gear up towards. And then just aligning more with other transit agencies. So for example, Soul Trans, if you were to board the bus in American Canyon right now and go to Vallejo, it would cost you $1.60 on the Route 10, but on their route that does something similar, it would cost you $2. If you were to go over to Sonoma County and do a local route, it's $2.10. And the region as a whole, like at MTC and things, they're looking to get us more aligned on a fair basis. So this might set us up well for that. And so what we're thinking in terms of the fare increases on the next slide, in terms of what that might look like. So you just see the numerical and percentage change, which I should have changed the columns there. That's on me. In terms of the amount of increase, but you're basically your standard fare will go up from $1.60 for an adult to $2 for children. That would translate down to the seniors. Down to $1 essentially, and then smaller increases to our already higher fares on the express routes, on BART, and then on our cash payments. And that's what that might look like. So we'll see how this plays out. Like I said, it'll go through many iterations therein, but wanted to give you some sense. And then on the next slide, it just talks about, okay, what that would mean for passes. And we'll get you in terms of those exact numbers, but we do in our policies have set things like, okay, if this is a single rate ride pass, what it means for the 31 day, what it means for the day pass, and what it means for the 20 ride pass. So I think that's all I have for you today. We will be bringing back at the next meeting an amended rider policy that we had done in draft form last time. So nothing on that today, but that will be coming back. And I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you for that presentation and showing us we're actually making improvements overall, which is great. And it's tough to say we're going to increase our fares, but obviously it's also time for that discussion. Are there any board comments or questions? Not at this time. So to be continued into our next time we meet, you'll have probably another update on this. And okay, thank you very much, Rebecca. So that was the last of our regular items. We do have a closed session item, and this is 12.1, conference with legal counsel and extending litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 5495 6.9. And so we will go into closed session and then following we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you. We did also lose another member. I assume that's okay. We can still meet. Okay, very good. Perfect. Yeah, yes. 7-inning stretch. Wondering if there's any coffee. Are you cold? I'm cold. Yeah. Let me see if there's a cup of coffee. You should not be paid. I did. Stand in. You should wear it. But yeah, then they don't do the total.
It's still recorded in one.
Breakout where Tony on a
Seems like every time.